there are a number of updates in the manifest, and in fact we can see them. We can see them right here. I'm just going to point them out now, and then we'll look at them separately. So underneath options and refresh, there are 3 new properties. Ignore refresh policy, skip refresh policy partitions, and effective date. Normally you don't need any of them. And then under dataset, there are 2 new properties. Apply refresh policies and keep refresh policy partitions. And again, in order to get the full benefits, you don't need to set any of them, because the pbi-tools defaults give you the right thing, and they do everything automatically. But you can play around with those 5 properties and sort of tweak things a little bit. And I've got some documentation in terms of what those 5 different what those 5 different properties do and what the default value is. I'm not going to read that out to you right now. That will come in the release notes, but I will basically show you sort of interactively. So let me start off here looking at this particular example. Remember, when it comes to data set deployments in pbi-tools, there are 2 aspects to it. One is actually deploying the model metadata, and then the other one is applying the refresh, right? And so the running a refresh, that's what's currently not working, again, because I don't have a database to connect to. For that reason, I've actually disabled refresh here. So we're just going to look at actually deploying that model. And I can show you the impact of this particular property here. So apply refresh policies it basically reads the definition for a policy. So what we looked at here, in terms of what different granularities we're using. And it will then also apply the current date, and it will create new partitions as needed, right? So this is just a metadata operation, and it's actually part of the dataset deployment. It's not part of refresh. And so we can take advantage of this already if we're just running a deployment here. So let me run the demo 2 deployment. So if I do pbi-tools deploy, I specify dot as the current folder reference. Then I specify the manifest name, which in this case is dataset. And then I specify the target environment, which in this case is demo 2. And just to be extra safe, I'm going to do what if, which will verify my credentials and everything else. It's always a good idea to start off with a what if deployment, and that will tell you whether you've missed anything in terms of syntax or credentials, but we're all good here, which means I can run the same thing again without what if. So what we're expecting now is basically just model metadata is going to be deployed, and the policy will be applied, which means I will end up with partitions with empty partitions created for me in relation to the current date. So if I run this, we're going to get some output here. By the way, I just realized the October release of Power BI Desktop is out. You can actually see that there. And so here we go. Right. So let's take a look at what happened here. So if I scroll up, so first of all, this is new. So this basically says the deployment determined that my model has a refresh policy for the taxi trips table. In that case, it will then go to the existing remote data set. It will read all the partition definitions, and it will ensure that none of those partitions are overwritten. Again, previously that would have happened. And then the model metadata is deployed. And then this has always been the case. We actually get a summary of all partitions currently in place. So this is a very good way of verifying what's here. And what we can see specifically, there is now a partition for the 3rd of October. Today is the 4th. If we're looking at this particular table, we can see that that's my refresh policy. And we're basically saying my incremental period should have 2 days and with an offset of -1. So today is the 4th of October, which means we're going back 1 day. We're going to the 3rd of October, and then we're creating partitions for 2 days. So that would basically be the 2nd and the 3rd. So those 2 partitions are my incremental period, and anything prior to that, so basically 1st of October and then anything in September, pretty much 3 months going back, that will be my archive window, and so that's what we're getting. As we can see here, none of those partitions currently have data in them, and as I explained, because I'm very silly, they're not going to have any data as part of this demo. But this is where we can see 2 features in play already. One is applying the policy. The second is preserving remote partitions and not actually overriding them. Because looking at the local definition of my model, and in fact, this is what I've got right here, we can see this table has 1 partition. And in fact, it has an M partition. It doesn't have a policy range partition. So previously, any existing remote partitions would have been replaced just by this single one. And we can actually see this is currently seeing data between the 7th and the 9th of August. And the reason was because only those partitions happen to be in the ready state.